Thank you so much, Whitney. Thank you so much. It's just been such an honor to have you here. Thank you for sharing your words and your insight with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a very big, well-deserved round of applause. Well, we've heard from a few of our speakers earlier on how purposeful business can drive inclusive progress on some of the greatest social, political, and economic challenges of our time. So let's dive into that a little bit more deeply. How do we move the money to achieve these aspirations? I'd now like to welcome to the stage our moderator for this session, Fiona Greig. Fiona is the Managing Director and Co-President of JPMorgan Chase Institute and a Women's Forum Rising Talent. Fiona, please come up and join me on the stage with your speakers.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here and extremely special to be here in person. I think this session is especially meaningful to me as I am somebody who really tries to bring purpose to my profession, to my family life, and even in my choices to fly across the ocean to be here at the Women's Forum. It's especially meaningful for me today. I'm joined by my mother, who is in the audience, and it goes without saying that I obviously wouldn't be here today and wouldn't be on this stage today if it weren't for her. So we are talking today about what does it mean to bring purpose to finance? And I thought I would get us started by giving a little example from my own work. I am the co-president of the JPMorgan Chase Institute, and I'm in the mode of data for good. Chase is the biggest bank in America. We bank half the households in the US, whether it's a checking account, a credit card, a mortgage. And with those data, those daily transactions, there are billions of them, we can use that data for good to understand the economy, to understand how families are doing financially, how policy is affecting families. And I'll give two quick examples. So we embarked on some work back in 2018 to understand healthcare expenses. In the US, we have a country that doesn't have universal healthcare. People have to pay out of pocket, even just to go to the doctor. And we noticed that families were going to the doctor more often when they had more cash on hand. That means that they were deferring care until they had more liquidity. And not only that, that after a major medical expense, they might also have an increase in their credit card debt. And that was particularly true for women. Women were more likely to defer care until they had more money in their accounts, and they were more likely to end up with greater credit card debt after a major medical expense. And so we published that to the world. We also conveyed that to JPMorgan Chase. And they took action by reducing the out-of-pocket healthcare expenses necessary for employees paid $60,000 or less, our lower paid employees. A second quick example, again, we have been focusing on just the ways in which financial outcomes differ, not just by gender, but also by race. And a number of years ago, we started to understand the racial gap in financial outcomes. And if you just look at liquidity, cash in people's accounts, for every dollar held by white families in America, black families have just 32 cents. That's in liquid cash. If you expand the picture to the entire net worth picture, all of assets, all of debts, 10 cents on the dollar. For every dollar held by white families, black families have just 10 cents. And this matters because it means that when families experience any kind of volatility, job loss, etc., those families who have less of a buffer are going to suffer more. They're going to cut their spending more. And that's exactly what has happened during COVID, right? We've experienced much more job loss among black families, Latinx. And so during COVID, we've been studying, okay, how is the spending going? How important are those critical, all that cash support that the government gave out? And we've been having monthly calls with the White House to demonstrate to them just how critical those fiscal supports have been during COVID, disproportionately benefiting low-income families, families with less liquidity, Black, Latinx families. So I start with those examples, and I want to turn to our panelists to bring in so many different perspectives. Ratna, I'm going to start with you, who's joining us virtually from Washington, D.C. Ratna is the Senior Advisor on Gender at the International Monetary Fund. And Ratna, I can very much empathize with the challenge before you. Macroeconomics is a field within economics that is disproportionately dominated by men, and obviously the International Monetary Fund deals with matters of macroeconomic policy. And so I'd love to hear from you about how you have convinced them, as the gender czar of the IMF, that gender is important from a macroeconomic policy standpoint.
A good day to everybody. Thank you so much for having me. That's a great question, Fiona. I wish I could say I've convinced everyone, but let me just give you some background. Under the leadership of 2 female managing directors, the previous and current one, and based on a number of analytical work IMF staff have conducted, the IMF now recognizes that gender disparities have negative macroeconomic consequences. And because that is so, it is squarely within the IMF's mandate. This is because where the economic empowerment of half of the population is curtailed by limited access to jobs, services, leadership positions, growth and productivity suffer, income inequality increases, and economic resilience erodes. And I just want to give you some of the results we found in our own study. So first, we found that if you address the impediments to female labor force participation, and also the education gaps, it can increase economic growth and resilience. And this also happens through productivity gains. It's not just because more women are working. They're also quite productive. We also found, and this is a paper I wrote with my co-authors, that a country's economic growth is higher simply when the number of women as users of finance increases. The more access they have to financial services and now digital services, we find that economic growth is higher. A second, inequality also falls in societies that are more financially inclusive. Both men and women benefit from financial inclusion, but our cross-country study, global study, finds that inequality falls more when women have greater access. Third, a larger share, and this is really important, a larger share of women as leaders in the corporate and financial sectors is associated with higher returns on assets and greater financial stability. So acknowledging, the evidence before us, our managing director created the senior advisor on gender position in her office that I hold, as you mentioned, to take this agenda forward. So what I've been tasked to do is to produce a comprehensive strategy to mainstream gender in the fund's work. It's a pretty ambitious vision that we have. And the vision is we want to apply a gender lens to all aspects of our core activities, to our annual consultation with member countries, and we have 190 member countries, our lending programs, our capacity development. Vision is ambitious, it can take time, but we don't want to compromise on this vision. And the ultimate goal is to provide country-specific and granular advice to our member countries. Because we acknowledge that macro policies can impact men and women differently. And so at the very least, we need to be mindful that fund policy recommendations do not worsen gender disparity. Instead, they proactively help close them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ratna. That is such an interesting perspective and a tall order. I want to turn to Sanja Udovicic. You're a partner at Shearman and Sterling, and as I understand it, you represent clients in the financing of large-scale infrastructure projects in developing countries in particular. And I would just love to hear more about how you have incorporated ESG and other forms of purpose into those deals.
Thank you, Fiona. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be on such a diverse panel. It's so rare for me. Most of the panels I'm on, I am the only woman on the panel. So this is really brilliant. So I have been working in this field for almost 3 decades. And look, most of the work that I've done has been in emerging markets and frontier jurisdictions, really developing critical infrastructure and transforming economies. It's been very exciting, very rewarding, very interesting work. And I've really seen in almost 3 decades a real evolution in this sort of purposeful implementation of policies, ESG and other policies, by the financial institutions that are funding these projects and these businesses. And to start with, there was a form of brave leadership that was laid out there by the development finance institutions, particularly the multilaterals, who went out and said, if you want our dollars, there's a particular way that you need to implement those dollars, and started to impose their environmental and social policies and require their borrowers to follow those and implement not just best practices, but world-class best practices in frontier jurisdictions in developing economies. And this involved evaluation of impacts and then implementation of management plans with measurable goals and measurable mitigation measures that people could then bring to bear in their projects. There are obviously other ways that the financial institutions have had an impact, a positive impact on environmental and social goals and other policies. There's clearly the choice of businesses and the choice of companies that they fund. And we've seen a number of institutions. It started as a trickle, maybe a decade and a half ago, of institutions saying they would no longer finance coal projects. And then it was oil projects. And now that trickle is becoming a tsunami almost. You can see that more and more institutions are saying, we are no longer funding, or we will by X date no longer be funding fossil fuel projects. So there's great purpose in that and great power in it too. We've also seen some really innovative incentives being offered by financial institutions in the field. So they're actually tying their products and their terms. They're offering improved terms to companies that are meeting their decarbonization targets. So as you meet each target, your margins, for example, on interest rates get lower. So really exciting developments. At Shearman and Sterling, we've been doing quite a lot of work in the transition space. And for example, we're doing one of the largest hydrogen projects at the moment. And it's really exciting to see the interest that this is generating in the market and the conversations that it has started. And it's wonderful to be doing all of that. So I've seen a great transition over 2 decades, but I've seen much less purpose being provided when it comes to gender equality in the projects. And I don't want to take up too much time because I'm sure there'll be other opportunities to speak, but maybe we can talk about that some more later.
Yes, you've whet my appetite for sure. Méka Brunel, you are the CEO of Gecina, which is a real estate investment company here in Paris. And as I understand it, you've incorporated ESG into all aspects of your business. Tell us more.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and good afternoon. Can I say exactly what you said? I feel really emotional because we didn't have any women's forum together in the same place last year. And I'm so pleased to see people in the same room, even though the room is not full. I'm so glad that we are in the same room, and thank you for the organization. I think that, and to be in such a beautiful panel with such a great people, I think that this is a blessing, so we have to celebrate that. ESG, so Gecina is a real estate, it's a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, listed at the Paris exchange, and we are the largest office REIT in Europe. We put ESG in the heart of our strategy, and I think that financing is a support to all the aspects of the business, whatever the business is, and ESG is part of the strategy for many, many years. I joined the company as a CEO in 2017, and before that, the company was doing compensation on the carbon. And I stopped compensation. I said, we cannot measure exactly what we are doing if we compensate. We definitely need to understand what is the real emission of our buildings, how we are to measure it, put in place process, complete it together, make it work together. And little by little, people, what everybody said since this morning, as an individual, we feel much more concerned than as organization. And by some extent, we are censoring our sensitivity when we are representing the organization, whereas in our regular life, I may say, in our real life, we would feel concerned and involved. So we shouldn't have those kind of boundaries. We should feel the same in every place. And so that's the reason we have been able to green 100% of our existing bonds afterward by putting in place voluntarily a new framework, much more harder than what it was before, just to make sure that we're gonna be net zero carbon by 2030, and we accelerated our decarbonation. But also we put in place gender equality in terms of pay. Actually, it have been done 6 years ago, because we have been very volunteer on that side too. We decided all by the sudden, once for all, to put some money and to reduce the gap in salary. Because you cannot spend your time saying that, well, women should be paid less. Yes, this is a shame, but we cannot do anything because they have children, they are living very far, and they don't want to take responsibility because they don't feel, assured, etc. Blah blah blah. We decided all by the sudden to allocate money. And by the way, I would like to underline that this was a decision of the board. Allocate money and fix the issues. And you know what? 67% of this money has been allocated to salary gap for women, but 33% to men. Because in some of the areas when you have where a lot of women, so the male were badly treated. So at the end of the day, we do not have those kind of issues in the company anymore. And we are focusing on making things better because we have no choice. ESG is not just about communication. It's not just about good faith. It's not just about, feeling concerned. This is the future. And this is the way you're hiring talent. You're keeping them. This is about the future of our kids, our grandchildren. This is about the world as a whole. This is about our commitments as human beings. And talking about women are more than 50% of humanity. So this is not about a minority to be preserved. We should, and women can be disabled, colored, different nationality, gay, whatever. They can have exactly the same type of misery. So we have to focus on this 50%, because if we are capable to fix those issues, we're going to fix it for everybody else, for all kind of other issues. And what we are observing in our company is that this diversity of education, of course, of gender, of origin, of different whatever, this is what makes us richer, taking into account different point of view, taking into account different position, and ultimately to create unity in diversity. Diversity is empowering us. And I'm not saying that everything is fixed. I had to intervene. By the way, the COVID and different lockdown have been very detrimental for women. For some reason, women believe that they are superwomen. We are not. We have to be clear about it. We are not superwomen. And we are superheroes. And by the way, we cannot do multitasking. Stop about that. And we should encourage our counterpart, gentlemen, those who are in the room and those who are not, we should encourage them to take responsibility. Even if it's not perfect, they can improve. And we should do the management at home also. But women became invisible. And this is a real issue in the coming period. And I had to intervene for a promotion. We had 4 people to promote, and one of them was taking more responsibility without having the title. And people say, why she doesn't have the title? And they say, well, she doesn't want. And I say, I'm sorry, this is a promotion. I'm not asking if they want. I mean, this is our decision. And so I had to call her, and she said, well, doesn't matter, don't worry, I'm going to take the responsibility. But I said, no, you're going to take the title too. So, but the fact that she wasn't, in the same room, she felt, guilty about. And we shouldn't feel guilty. We haven't done anything wrong. Maybe some of us have done something wrong, but it has nothing to do with our gender. So we should feel just being involved alongside with the gentlemen we have alongside with us and feel just part of this humanity, this mankind, womankind, whatever. This consider that we are all together and we have so many issues to fix on ESG, so many things to do that we should be focused on that and consider that this purpose is big enough to be completed. I'm sorry, this is not the question you asked, but this is my answer.
Thank you, Méka. Florence, you are the president of the French Federation of Insurance, and I understand from you that you see this actually as a service that's disproportionately helping women. Tell us more.
Absolutely. And first, thank you so much for your invitation to be on this panel today. It's such a pleasure to be face-to-face with a number of you rather than behind the screen like last year. So thank you so much, and let's enjoy this panel. Yes, I'm going to talk about insurance. And basically, what is insurance? Well, as insurers, we protect, we finance, and we employ. If I start with employment, insurance in France is a very feminine work. 60% of the workload is feminine, 60% are managers, but when it comes to top executives, the percentage drops to 30%. All these percentages have raised in the last decade, but obviously there is still room for more for the executive talents. And that's the reason why I personally support all the mentoring programs that I can find, because I believe that this is very effective for the promotion of women at top executive tasks. Second, protection and prevention. This is the core of our action. You have said so. Women are more economically vulnerable than men. And you can see that in all the crises. The 2008 financial crisis, you can see that through the COVID crisis also. So your study, the study that you have just mentioned in your bank is very interesting. Well, the AXA Group has also commissioned a study on the global economic impact of the COVID crisis on women, which shows that 57% of women feel that they are not adequately protected against life risks, such as health or job losses. So this is a real challenge for us as insurers. We have already taken action. We have we finance and we study specific risks which are linked to women. For example, the impact of the volumes of drugs, not only on average population, but on women. We fund also a number of prevention programs on heart disease, because a lot of people believe that heart disease is mainly for men, but that's not true. It's also for women. We have started designing specific products taking into account specific needs which are expressed by women. And last but not least, through the financial education program, we do allow to promote the financial independence of women, which is absolutely key. The third dimension is investment. And investment is key. I'm coming back from COP26, maybe like some of you in the audience. And I reiterated this very strong commitment of insurers to fight against global warming. And fighting against the global warming is absolutely key when you know that children and women have 14 times more probability to die in a natural catastrophe. And it was absolutely obvious in Glasgow, and it was obvious for the UN, for the OECD, that since insurance, we can act on the investment side, but we manage the risk, so we manage the natural risk, so we are key to find a transition, an economic and socially viable transition towards a more global world, which really takes into account the topic of the global warming. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you each. I want to move from what you do to how you do it. And, you know, as women leaders, we are part of change. We are part of organizations, and oftentimes that change happens in the micro moments, in the anecdote, in the conversation, you know. And so bring to life for us what it has been like to walk in your shoes and inspire change along that journey. And Florence, I'll stick with you, so if you're ready.
Yes, maybe just 2 anecdotes. 20 years ago, I was promoted at the head of the Insurance Supervisory Authority in Paris, and at that time, Daniel Nouy was also at the head of the Banking Supervisory Authority. And of course, as executive of the financial supervision in Paris, we were regularly invited to social events in the financial sector. And very often, there were hundreds of gray suits, but we were the only 2 women in the audience. So when you really make a link between this experience and the percentages that I just mentioned, you see that 20 years ago, I think that the administration was somehow in advance compared to the private sector, and now, at least in my sector, a lot has been done. But not everything is fixed, actually. In my current functions and responsibilities, I had to choose a new communication agency recently, in fact, some months ago. And there were 2 top-listed agencies, and they made a pitch, both of them, and one of them came and was represented by 5 men, 100% male representation. Well, I let you guess which one I chose, and not from a gender point of view, but just on the rationale of the key indicators that we had. But I was really surprised, because even in this world of communication, then an agency can come and pitch today in Paris with 100% male representation.
Wow.
Surprising.
Yeah. Méka, you were already taking us down that personal journey, but tell us more.
I have to tell you the truth. Despite the fact that I look confident and everything, I always thought that I was illegitimate. And and at the same time, I never take no as an answer. So I don't know. It's a mix of the two. But usually, I always think that it's not going to work. But as I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic. But I consider that asking is, at the end of the day, I will get a no, and nothing will change. I'm always willing to move forward, and most of the time I'm surprised. Most of the time I'm surprised on a good side. Sometimes I'm nicely surprised, but sometimes it's really deceiving, and you feel really miserable because you go back to the fact that you are illegitimate, and we shouldn't feel like this. Nobody should feel like this. Never, ever. We should never consider that we are not legitimate in our expertise or capacity, what we are doing, and how we are doing it. One of the things
I think they call that the imposter syndrome, right?
the imposter syndrome, and I still have it actually. So I'm always surprised when Audrey Cherkov calls me and say, "I would like you to a panel." I'm like, "Really? Oh God, thank you." And that's 100% true.
You make a great panelist, in addition to being a CEO.
No, but very seriously, I think that the reality is that there's a lot of bias in the educations all of us have received, wherever we are. And I'm very concerned about what's going on now, because it's not getting any, we shouldn't consider that everything is fine because laws are here, because people seem sensitive to what we are talking about. It is not true. And lockdown has been a symbol, and we need to have more data about the lockdowns. What are the consequences of the lockdowns on women going back to what they should, usually do, and we should really feel concerned about. At the same time as we should never take for granted what's going on, including among ourselves, among women. Sometimes our own bias push us to have reactions which are coming from our education, our families, our backgrounds, and also something, what people would think of this or that. My answer is, who cares? But when I'm saying this, I'm not, that much practicing, so I need to improve.
Sunny, how about you?
Well, I'd just like to say, I definitely hear both of those experiences, and I've lived through so many of them throughout my career. The point you just made, Méka, about education, we're still failing our children. Just a few short years ago, my little boy, when he was 3, he went to university. He went to nursery. He's not that precocious. He went to nursery in his favorite pink T-shirt. And his nursery school teacher said to him, "Oh, pink is for girls." So it's, we still have a long way to go in education. So my anecdote is, there were so many, but I'll just choose one. I was in a negotiation in a meeting room in Rio, and it was a big meeting room. There are 40 people, very complicated project. And I look around the room, and yet again, disappointed that out of the 40 people in the room, there are 5 people who are women. And we get onto the topic of policies, and we spend quite a bit of time talking about ESG policies, and then we get onto the gender policy for this particular project, this business. And it's just this one line, you must comply with gender equality laws. And I, couldn't help myself. I sort of made a little joke about, well, it would be difficult for this room to comply with gender equality laws, let alone any, the business. So, I was trying to make light. I use humor a lot to try and resolve tricky situations. One of the men on the other side of the table piped up and he said, "You're right, it's still disappointing to see so few women in the room. But of the 5 women in the room, 3 of them are leading the negotiations for their sides of the table, and they're doing that very ably. So I'd like to make a little shout out to the men who support women when they see an opportunity to do so. A shout out to the men in the audience. you are probably feeling today the way we often feel when we're in a room and being the minority in the room. So well done for being so brave and joining us today.
And if I may, you tempted us with a bit of unfinished business in terms of the perhaps the S in the ESG, the gender aspect. Is there more that you want to say on that?
Thank you. Yes, please. So, you know, often we hear how difficult it is to address the issue, right? How difficult it is to measure, how difficult it is to measure the impact, how difficult it is to make a difference, how complicated the various reasons are that we hear these statistics again and again. So in the legal profession, it's 50-50, give or take, at entry level. But then when you get to partner level, let alone to senior partner level, those percentages dwindle very quickly. And there are inflection points throughout people's careers. It would be wonderful to see sort of more purpose, more target set, and then to actually see a difference happening in our lifetime and not in 130 years. It feels like it's just taking far too long to see those numbers change. And I'm very pleased to see that institutions are now, you know, some of them starting to do that. And I'll just like to mention just one example. So back in 2018, BlackRock said they wouldn't, or they announced that they expected that the companies they invested in would have at least 2 women on their board. It's a start. Now, 2 out of 10 or 2 out of 15 is not enough, but it's a start. And more institutions, I would like to see more institutions doing that. And what I'd like to see, if it's possible, and I think it is more of that sort of measurable goal setting, the evaluation. Where is the company? Where is the business? Where is the project now? Where would it ideally want to be? And how can we get ourselves there? That would be great.
Good challenge. Ratna, we're coming to you. Tell us a little bit about your journey at the IMF and that personal journey.
Thank you, Fiona. So, you know, as you rightly pointed out, it's pretty much has been a white male-dominated institution. It's changing now, and there are quite a few barriers that I did break. So, for example, I was the only non-white woman when I was hired in the European department in '91. I was the first woman to be promoted at a managerial level in the research department in late '90s. But I want to talk about the turning point for me. And that was, when I was asked to lead a mission, it's called a surveillance mission, to a particular country. I apologize, I won't mention the country. And it was going to be the first all-women team in the IMF's history. So it was really exciting, just the prospect. It was also the first mission that I was going to lead. So I worked really hard for this mission. And then what happens is, 2 days before my departure, the authorities of this particular country, they wrote to our management and said, actually they faxed, and they said they would not want a non-white woman to lead an IMF team. Now, I had never met them. They had made the judgment simply on the basis of my gender and color of my skin. And you can imagine, I was completely devastated. And for the first time, to be honest, I really understood what discrimination felt like. I've always been very sympathetic, but this was really a double whammy. Now, my management at the IMF, they were very supportive. They gave me the option. They said, if you want to go, go. If you don't want to go, that's fine with us, knowing that I'm going to face a hostile environment. So I thought overnight and I decided to go. And once I decided to go, the IMF management was super supportive. They told the authorities that IMF had full confidence in me, and if they did not accept me as the mission chief, there would be no mission to that country in that year. The bottom line is the mission went extremely well. And the lesson is twofold. First, one should never give up. You have to put yourself out there, even if the environment is hostile. Don't be afraid of failing. Facts are that most likely you're not going to fail because you are going to prepare much more thoroughly than the others. And second, you do need to have the support of your managers and institution. So since then, I have very diligently mentored many junior staff, whether women or non-white, and I've followed two rules. Just inspire them to take on challenges and support them through their journey. You know, it doesn't mean that I've arrived myself and I still stumble, but I think I just have to keep reminding myself, just like Méka mentioned. So that's my story.
Thank you. And Ratna, I almost feel like you took my cue in that, you know, we're going to close here with a call to action in the spirit of accelerating impact. So beyond what the very inspiring words that you just said, what more call to action would you give us and our audience here today?
Unmute myself. I have a very call out, and that is follows from the example that I just gave you. You know, given that fostering gender equality is not only the right thing to do, but it also brings enormous benefits to the whole society, and that's been documented. I really would like everybody to recognize your own implicit or even explicit biases against minorities, whether women or race. And I say this as a message for both men and women. And it does need a lot of introspection, because then you need to think about ways you can address them in your work and personal lives, as many of my co-panelists talked about. So that would be my key message.
Thank you, Ratna. Sonny, a call to action.
So one of the panelists earlier today had a great message, which I'm just gonna repeat and explain why it resonated. She said, when things get tough, you either back yourself or back down. And I prefer to back myself. That was her message, right? And I think that's such a powerful message and such a good thing to remember. And particularly echoing what Méka had said, you know, I am a fellow sufferer of imposter syndrome. It hits me all the time, and it's probably a good thing, right? Because it enhances your performance, it makes you think more deeply, it makes you question yourself all the time, it makes you work harder. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be sometimes a debilitating thing. And that's where you need the support of your colleagues, your mentors, your sponsors. And that's what we can all be doing for our junior colleagues, helping them to get over their challenges and the things that hold them back, and whether it's imposter syndrome or whatever it is, we can really help, not just by being role models, but by talking to them, inspiring them. I found all of today's sessions massively inspiring, and I've been so privileged to be here and so grateful to be in this room with you all. So that would be it. Back yourselves.
Méka.
Well, resonating to what you said, I think that one of the main goals we should have is to work on education and start education very young with young girls and boys. And by the way, educate also the teachers at the same time for the pink t-shirt, and help them to understand that they can do whatever they want to do. They can go on STEMs. They can become engineers. We need a lot of engineers. I'm a civil engineer. My origin is Persian. And in my family, and you see I have a lot of white hair, the question was not on the table to say whether I'm a girl or a boy. What should I do? Why do I have to go engineering when not doing, I don't know, literature or whatever, and piano, which I did, but I was so terrible. So I stopped very soon. But look, what I'm saying is that briefly I would like to just finish by French and English are not my mother tongue. My mother tongue is Persian, but I learned these two languages at school starting in kindergarten. And one thing the French teachers taught me when I was young is impossible n'est pas français. Impossible is not French, and I believe it shouldn't be in any language in the world. It's not impossible, so we should get things done.
And Florence.
Well, I think girls in engineering and scientific studies are a real challenge. It was already my call for action last year, but I will repeat it today. I think we need to do everything that we can to engage more young girls towards scientific studies, because we need in all our businesses, be it in your business, in my business, in insurance, in the financial business, we need women with scientific backgrounds.
Thank you. Well, I'm gonna close with a 30-second story of hope for you, Sani, which is that I have 3 kids, 2 girls, 10 and 8, and a 2-year-old boy. And the 2-year-old boy loves to wear his older sister's dresses. So about once a week, he wears a dress. Some days he wears a tracksuit. So I take him to daycare, and the daycare is run by a gay man. And so I picked him up one day. He was wearing a tracksuit, and I said, you know, I know some days he's in a dress, and some days he's in a tracksuit, and he looks at me and he says, he's a trendsetter. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to my wonderful panelists.